Chris, welcome to Skipping the Small Talk podcast, man.
Dude, I'm pumped.
Yeah, it's kind of weird having my pastor in my bedroom, but
Not the first time.
I guess everybody.
Probably.
Oh my gosh, I guess everybody now knows that I'm filming this or recording this in my bedroom.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've said that yet, but dude, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to kind of talk and got a couple of different things in mind what I want to talk about. Some things that I've always wondered, and now I'm gonna get to find out what it's like. And honestly, just starting right off the bat with talking about you being my pastor, I kind of really want to dive into that and see what it's like for you, and I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. But when I first met you, I found out you were a pastor, right? And it's kind of interesting that maybe that stereotype that people have is like pastors. And I know you've given countless, maybe not countless, but stories about meeting people. You tell them you're a pastor, and they're like, all right, deuces, see you later.
Yeah.
Maybe speak on what that's like for you, because your friend, like you've developed friendships. Like for instance, me, when we first met, like I said, I knew you were a pastor, and somehow you've developed relationships and friendships with people, and it didn't scare them away. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like for you, being friends with people and like being their pastor as well?
Yeah.
Maybe like if that's awkward or I don't know.
Yeah, every interaction is different. I mean, the one with us, like, it is funny to think back on every person I meet and they hear my pastor, there's a potential that I will then like become friends with them. But like most of the time it just goes to, oh yeah, no, we're acquaintances and like I help them or do anything, or we don't have a relationship or whatever. So it's just odd whenever it does blossom into a friendship. Because it is a weird thing, like in some ways people have said before, like you're a professional Christian. And so you have to be nice to everybody. Like you have to try to like invest in them and pursue them. And some people honestly like it in times past have been like somewhat offended if you don't pursue a friendship with them. Like, am I not good enough? Like, do you not like me? And they read into it just because of the fact that I am a pastor. Like, I don't know, they expect that I'm just going to have a million friends, and nobody has time for that.
Like it's a requirement almost of you.
Yeah. It's like, oh, well, you don't want to hang out with us all day, every day or whatever. Like, we must not be good enough for you. Like,
which stems into the church maybe too. Like, oh, we're not good enough for the church because you as a pastor / friend don't really pursue us maybe.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. It's just odd.
I've never thought of that.
And it turns into like, it's weird when it crosses the, I guess, I don't know, the threshold of like, you're on this threshold of, I meet you, for instance, and obviously, like, I'll just be 100% honest. It's like, oh, this guy's like cool. He seems like a great dude. You'd be the type of person I would want to come to the church. And there's this weird like motivation in me to be like, oh, well, I want to like pursue a friendship with this person because like, man, they would be really great if they came to my church.
Right.
And separating that out in your mind and trying to be objective and be like, no, like what? That's a person. It's not, I'm not just trying to bring converts into my church. It's like, no, I want to just genuinely try to build relationships. So it's a weird struggle. But then as you start building relationships with certain people, you're like, yep, they're definitely not going to be my friend. Or like, oh, like, no, this person really could be. And that's with us. I feel like it's stemmed into that. It's like, oh, at some moment I realized like, yeah, Josh is not just some young adult that I've built a relationship with and I'm trying to push and recruit and even like get you into the student ministry is how it started. Like I saw you and you'd be a great person that would invest in young people's lives, but like separating that out and realizing like, oh no, now you're actually like someone that might be a friend of mine and you live 2 doors down, which is great as well.
I wish it was 3.
Yeah, everybody wishes that. But it turned into this friendship or whatever, and then you're like, oh, okay. Now where does it go from here? Like, do they still see me as like just a pastor, or are they crossing that threshold too? That's, I feel like, the weirder one. Like some people cross it, and because I invest in them, even just on a level of like they come to me for counseling in some ways or just advice or wisdom, and I give it and then just try to care for them as best as I can. They feel some attachment to me, whereas it's odd, but I don't feel that attachment to them because they're the 5th person that week that I've given like advice or counsel to, and so they cross that threshold super early, and I'm like, I literally don't know much about you, but they feel a connection to me by interactions we've had or hearing me speak on Sunday mornings. And it feels like I'm personally invested in them, but I'm really not. And so if they cross that threshold too early, you're like, oh, yeah, it's weird. It's a little creepy of like, oh, they know who Eli is. They come up and are like, they think Eli should know who they are. he doesn't know who anybody is. Like, he lets my son for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's just odd. Like, it's this weird thing where they feel more attached to you than you might feel to them. But then figuring out when those feelings are mutual, it's this super awkward. It sounds like we're talking about like romance or love
Yeah,
or whatever,
well,
but like it's just
dude.
that relationship. It's sort of weird. It's just a
Well,
weird thing.
yeah. I feel like there's boundaries that have to be set almost.
Mhm.
And then maybe not publicly, but just for your own mental health and the sake of you,
Mhm.
setting those boundaries in your mind. It's weird to, like you said, to make the distinction between pastor and friend, right?
Mhm.
With some people, pastor and
Yeah.
that connection, because in a larger church, where you pastor and where I attended was, close to, I mean, now it's growing, and like 1,000 people, maybe it's
Mhm.
800 to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
I mean, just if we're thinking about that logically, you can't really have a relationship with 800 people. It's
Yeah.
hard to have a relationship. I don't have, too many friends, and it's hard to really dive in with those people.
Mhm.
And then you bring it into your career or your job, your occupation, and
Yeah.
then that job actually requires this ethical demand of you to be friendly with people.
Yeah.
Dude, it's stress. It sounds stressful. Like I know we've had conversations off, off just on our own and off the air or whatever, just about how where I work and the things I do, I can say whatever I want constantly and be
Mhm.
this person who's like, not just like, I'm not trying to allude that you don't live a life of congruency, but for me, it's like, I don't have the ethical requirement for me to do this
Yeah.
or to act a certain way. Not that you wouldn't do anything that I'm not doing, but it's like, the responsibility that you have for some people ethically is maybe a little bit
Yeah.
higher, and like thinking about that
Mhm.
maybe is difficult. I've never.
Yeah. It's weird. Like I had never thought of it too much until like I talked with one of the other pastors, the executive pastor Andy, one time about it, and he's like, it's a horrible world to live in when your morality is tied to your employment.
Mm-hmm.
And not even necessarily your actual morality, but your perceived morality.
Ooh, that's good.
So it's like, oh, if person A like sees you in some compromising position, like even though you could, if you had a time to sit down with them and explain, hey, this is why I was here at this place at this time, like their perceived understanding of what you look like in that moment is like, that's their reality, and it can have an effect on your employment. And I mean, that hasn't happened very much with me or whatever, but it is something that's weird. It's like trying to, just like you always feel like you have to keep your guard up a little bit of like, what am I doing? Like, where am I going? It comes out all the time with like drinking and stuff like that. It's or just social media posts and stuff like that, where I really don't post almost anything, because it's like, man, people could take this the wrong way, or you say one thing that someone reads into, and it's like, man, well, they're on this side of the spectrum, or they're way over there. It doesn't, like, even right now, I'm being political, like trying not to say one party or the other, because it's like, well, like, I don't want people to read into that.
I don't want to offend people too. That's a big thing.
Yeah, because you can lose influence in a position of like, in a ministry position. It's like, oh, that person thinks of me a certain way, and now I lose influence, like just because of something I posted on Twitter. Like, that would be foolish or whatever. But it's like anybody else. Most other people, and this isn't necessarily true, but most other people, any job you hold, you can cheat on your wife, and like, cool, like it has a lot of consequences. But your job, it's not like at your job they're like, hey, sorry, you're done. Like you lose your job now, and you probably can't get another job for another like 5-10 years. Like that's one like pressure where it's like, oh
yeah, just thinking about that in general. Compare that's crazy you say that. I remember. Speaking on influence, this spiritual, I would say, mentor leader for my family growing up, she talked to me when I was really starting to progress into thinking I was going to be a missionary or be a pastor or something. And I was really, because I drink alcohol and I actually really enjoy it. And like I was talking to her about how that's the case, and she's somebody who I know is against it. Like, don't sip it. The Bible speaks. Don't be drunk with wine, so why even mess with it? Why even tempt yourself? But I asked her, I was like, I really don't think it's a big deal, and I have my own philosophy about that. I really don't think it's a big deal. I think if you're a responsible individual and disciplined with how much you're intaking and who you're doing it around and that kind of stuff, it really doesn't matter. That's just my opinion. I'm not really going to change my mind on that. But for her, when I told her those things, I was like, yeah, I drink. And she's like, oh, like, I understand, I understand. And I'm trying not to like ruin her reputation as a person, because she's an amazing woman. She's great. She's been a great help to me growing in my relationship with God and my mom and all this stuff. But she said, she gave me this story of this pastor who was really looked up to, all these different things, and he was out on a boat one weekend, and he was drinking a beer, on a boat in the water, somewhere far away, probably, last thing he's going to see is somebody from his church. Somebody from the church saw him, and drank it, and it ruined everything. I think he lost his ministry. And she said that to me, and she's like, do you really want to put yourself in that position? And my response was probably not the best response, but I was like, well, I wouldn't want those type of people at my church if they leave because I'm drinking a beer and see that. But I think that story, or just that in general, that mindset is kind of the thing we're getting at, that what you do, okay, that pastor could have been drinking one beer. That's not getting drunk. He's just sipping. But the person on the receiving end of that sees that, and their mind starts racing. My pastor's an alcoholic. He's living a double lifestyle. He's doing these things. Yep. And next thing you know, rumors start spreading. Next thing you know, hey, the elders or whoever it is come to the pastor like, hey, we know you're not like this. But these people think that, and they're not going to listen to anything you have to say anymore. Yeah. And we have to release. And it's just that demand, I think, on being a pastor is kind of crazy. Yeah. Just thinking about that. And I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's wrong. All I know is that it is that, and the only thing that you can do is respond to that almost.
Yeah. I think that on that issue specifically, it's one that I deal with. Even like I think it's changing a little bit. Whereas like people who are older, even on our staff, like I've had many conversations. Like I want to make sure I'm above reproach, and I drink. My name's Chris Voltz. I drink alcohol, just in case it was unclear. Like, but like we've had these conversations because I want to be above reproach. And I want to talk to the other party, be like, hey, you guys need to know this. Like, I drink alcohol, and we've had conversations, and it's funny hearing the responses from like whoever's oldest in the room all the way down to the other people my age. And it is interesting because I remember talking about this one time in the lead pastor's office, and all the guys are sitting in there. So there's 5 of us in there, and we're talking around it. And Pastor Andy, the one I talked about earlier, he's great, but he's like, I just don't understand. Like I'll drink wine every once in a while, like whatever. But at the same time, like I don't ever find myself in a context where you would like ever have a drink. Like, when are you ever in a context where people are drinking? And I was like, what? My exact response was, dude, when are you in a context where there's not drinking?
Yeah.
Like literally everywhere I go, like, I don't know, as a 20-something, it's like, hey, you guys want to hang out? Yeah, there's alcohol. Like it's not oh man, like there's alcohol. And it's like hushed. Yeah. It's like, no, that's just the thing. It's just it. Like if I'm going to go, and I told him this, I was like, if I'm going to go hang out with another guy and like talk even just like Bible stuff or discipleship or anything, there is a way higher chance I'm going to say, hey, do you want to go grab a beer than, hey, do you want to go grab coffee? Like, I'm not, I don't do that. Like, I don't understand.
Well, it's just not you.
It's not me, and it's not.
You put too much cream in your coffee anyway.
Yeah, I know.
So, I'm just kidding.
I started drinking it black. It's so great.
Sorry, I didn't mean to switch.
No, it's fine. But
no, but that's so true.
Yeah, but it's like, I'm always in those contexts. Right. What are you talking about? Right. Like, but I think for him, it's like, it is like the culture is totally changing where anybody our age is like, what do you mean? Like, I even see a lot of people our age, like there's not a lot of those people who even think twice when they see me drinking alcohol. People that are older would be like, oh, okay, so you drink. And they're not necessarily upset by it, a lot of them.
Right.
But there is a thought in their mind of like, oh, you're a pastor and you drink. A lot of people my age, though, like they don't even think of it. If I were to take a drink, it would be just like anybody else. Like, that's just not a thing.
It's almost more weird if you don't for our generation, our age. Maybe. Like, not that's it makes it sound like we're alcoholics, but I mean, there's something up. Like, are you trying, like, for real, it's like a red flag alert for me. Like, that sounds bad. If you're listening to this and you don't drink, it's not a red flag alert. What I mean is just like, if I say something, if I'm thinking, hey, do you want to go grab a beer, like you said, and they're like, no, I don't drink. Like, I'm sorry, but my first thought is usually like, oh, something, maybe something you're struggling with it, you're not drinking right then. That's always an option. But like, are you trying to be like too religious? Like, are you too good for this? That's also my other thought. So it's almost like you're trying to separate. Sorry about that. It's never happened before. I didn't think I was that popular. Got a phone call. But yeah, it's usually the opposite. Like when someone doesn't drink, I'm kind of thinking, oh, like, all right. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I've never really thought of.
Yeah.
thought of that before.
Yeah, I mean,
It's funny.
We don't have to talk about alcohol forever, but
Yeah.
but this is one of the first things that like, even I had weird interactions with like people when I first started working at church, and my wife was a teacher. And after school, they would have these things they call safety meetings. Where
Shout out to Grace.
Yeah, my wife. So she would teach, and all the other teachers, they wouldn't say they were going to go out and drink after work. So they, in front of the kids, they would say, "Hey, we're going to have a safety meeting." That's what they would call it. So whatever. But I would go to the safety meetings afterwards. But I had a pastor. One of my bosses was like not comfortable with us drinking, and so I was like, okay, well, I'll respect that. I'll honor that. And it wasn't. He didn't have a problem with it if you did it inside your home, but like in public, he was like, please refrain. So I did. I was like, okay, that's fine. But I would go to these safety meetings, and everyone would have a drink, and I would order a Coke or whatever, and they would like, where there was no doubt before about like anything. It was like, oh, this person's a normal person. Like even the fact that I was a pastor was like, oh, okay, cool, that's totally fine. But there was no doubt about like that I was normal until I didn't drink, and then like I would just noticeably see people respond differently.
Yeah.
And like feel judgment where I was like, I'm telling you, I'm not condemning you in any way. Like my boss doesn't want me to drink. And even when I would say those types of things, like it would just introduce this weird, like, why? Like, are you serious? Like, what's going on? What's wrong with this? Like they would feel that condemnation where I would hate that I would like be putting that on them by not taking a drink. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the thought too of like thinking about as long as like I think it all comes down to motivations, right? Because what's your motivation for drinking? What's your motivation for not drinking? Like for you, you've expressed to me that a lot of you just said it kind of places you go, people your age, it's always just we're all hanging out. We're all kind of like grabbing a beer. That's our new coffee, or that's our new come over and watch TV. We don't watch really TV much. Let's go grab a beer. Like we like the community aspect of it. For people who don't want to drink, it sounds like it's just, I don't know. I think for me, it's like if you don't want to drink, don't drink. As long as you're not like judging. I think that's what it comes down to. You know what I mean? Yeah. And same for me. Like as long as I'm not judging the people who aren't drinking, and as long as you're in control of like discipline, because that's the thing. I think the people who you've talked to who don't drink, they want to set a good example. Nothing's wrong with that. Yeah. As long as the example you're setting isn't to make yourself look better, right? And to whatever that is. I don't know.
And if it's all about like making sure that you are, above reproach is the super churchy way to say it, but like even just like not bringing any confusion into the situation for like I have a lot of the people I talk to who don't drink. They're like, well, like I'll drink if my kids aren't around. So if my wife and I go out to dinner, I'll have a drink. But like around my kids, I don't have it in my house because I don't want my kids to like, drink it. Like, whatever. I won't have it in my house. And I don't drink around my kids because like they're not yet at an age where they can understand that and they can discern. They don't have the discernment to like understand. And I'll like have conversations about drinking. I'll be honest about the fact that I do, but like they don't understand it yet. They're at too young of an age to understand. And so when they're of an appropriate age, I will start to drink again in front of them. But like I'm discerning as a parent, like, hey, I'm not going to do that right now. And I think if you're going to make that call and you have a real reason to, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, cool. That's a good explanation. Not some like twisted, oh man, like scripture says to have a drop of alcohol is a sin. It's like, that's not necessarily true. Like, don't use that if there is other reasons. Yeah. A
lot of context to that people misinterpret things. But I guess it just all comes down to personal convictions as well. That's a whole other thing. So, switching, because we talked about alcohol for about 20 minutes.
We did.
But
that's fine.
That's fine.
Drink up.
Like what made you want to become a pastor? Did you always want to do that? Like high school? No?
Not necessarily. I remember when I was a sophomore in high school, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I didn't really care. I'm not the type of person that's always
still don't.
Even I've never like planned my life out like some people do, and that's good in some ways. It's negative in other ways. Like as a sophomore, my dad came to me and was just like, hey, my dad was a pastor at one point in time. He came to me, he's like, hey, I think you have some gifts in this area. I think I see the way that you love on people, and I think you should consider going into ministry and becoming a pastor. And one of the negatives of not really ever planning your life, I was like, okay, cool. Like, that sounds fine. Like, that's what I'll do. Like I literally put almost no thought into it. I wouldn't condone doing that. If you're considering going into ministry, definitely put more thought into it than that.
I don't know, man. That's pretty.
I don't know. But I didn't think about it, and so it was the same thing with like that's when I chose to go to a Christian college that my brother went to. I was like, well, there's that one. I only applied to one school. Like it was like, yeah, I'll just do that. I never put a ton of thought into it. I just did it. I don't even think I really understood what that was going to mean for the rest of my life at all until I was like, I don't know, 3 years into my degree.
Wow.
So like, I don't know, you definitely put more thought into it, but like, I never necessarily wanted to do anything different. Like, I was just like, cool, this is a track that seems fun. My dad told me like, he thought I'd be good at it and I trusted him and I went for it.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
And he kind of gave me opportunities like, even in youth group, like he sort of pushed me to try to get some leadership, and the youth pastor sort of was talking to me about it and what his life was like as a youth pastor and all that. So like, I don't know, it wasn't like I had some experience with it that was negative or anything like that at all. I had all positive experiences that were well like crafted in some ways of like, oh, you want to go into ministry? Let's show you what it's like. Did those experiences actually show me what it's going to be like? No, not at all. But I had some good experiences with it, so I never put tons more thought into it. I just did it. Like, okay, cool. I'll get a degree and I'll go get a position somewhere at a church and see what happens.
Wow. And so sophomore in high school, your dad comes to you, tells you what you're going to, no, I'm just kidding. He asks you, or he says, you should do this. And you just decide to do it. 2 more years, you're picking schools. Your brother went to the school and you're like, I'm going to go to this school. School is Cedarville University.
Mm-hmm.
And you decided to do that. 3 years in, you said you started to realize what going to a Christian university really was like, and then you're a senior, and now it's like, okay, what did you go for your bachelor's in ministry, bachelor's in?
Yeah, so the technical degree I have is a pre-seminary Bible degree. Okay. So that sounds like crazy, like, oh, you have to go to seminary or whatever. It was more like mini seminary degree, so you're doing like languages, classes on specific books of the Bible and just learning like, and then theology and ministry classes, stuff like that. It was just a full, bachelor's degree in Bible and stuff like that. It's just like, yeah, you want to be pastor? You should do pre-sem. And then if you do go to seminary, you can clip out at different stuff. And I got to do that too. So
cool.
So
you're from Indiana. I know I didn't ask, and I'm sure that I put that in the intro. I already know I did.
Yeah.
But after that, it's like, now you're deciding where you want to work, right? Because you graduate from Cedarville with that degree, and now what? What's that process like for a pastor? What's that like where you just start, I'm going to apply at this church, and I have some videos of me preaching at university a little bit. You can speak on that. I know, weren't you really involved in some preaching and stuff?
I was. I mean, that's a really good question. I haven't thought a ton about it in a long time, but like the process of being, a senior at some school where like, everybody's just trying to get jobs in churches, and it's like no one has any more experience than another person. Like grades aren't necessarily going to, I don't know if that it probably matters in other fields, but in this field specifically, it's all about your personality, like the way that you interact with other people. Like people can care less about your GPA once at first it gets you somewhere, but as soon as then you're on a phone call with the church, like boom, that's going to speak way more to what you're going to be like than your actual GPA will. I don't know, the way that I did, and this is ridiculous, but this is how my life has been. I put some thought into it. I met after my junior year, during the summer, I met a guy who was a pastor in South Carolina, and talked to him, and he said they had a residency program for young guys that want to get some experience being a pastor. And just seeing what it's like without the responsibilities of a pastor, also without a paycheck was one of the things. So you would just go get a job at like Starbucks or something and be a pastoral resident at their church, which is, that's cool. It's a great way to get free labor as a pastor. That's fine.
So like an intern, sort of.
Basically as an intern, and you get a ton of responsibility and you just learn and grow and grow and grow. Because at 22, man, you're not ready to be a pastor, for sure. I was not. But what happened with that was I thought that was the track I was going to run down, but because I wasn't, married yet. I was trying to get married, trying to get engaged to the girl I was dating. Grace now is my wife.
Yeah.
Um,
I hear that's a
I
whole
wanted
nother
to stay.
story.
Yeah, that is a whole other story. I wanted to stay in the area a little bit longer, where she was from Ohio. So before I moved to South Carolina, I was planning on just like doing anything I could to stay around. And so
Whoa.
I got an internship for the whole summer after my senior year at the church I work at now, Far Hills.
I didn't know that.
Yep, yeah. So
Wow.
I was planning on moving to South Carolina at the
Oh
end
my
of that
gosh.
internship, but I wanted to buy some time so I could convince her dad to let me marry her and then propose and then move to South Carolina.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd that work out?
Yeah, it did work out. I got his permission and it was great and
I
proposed.
think you're lying.
But then, well, this was way far into the process of that whole other long story.
Oh, okay.
But I basically took this position as an intern at this church for purely selfish motives to just stay around the area so I could get married, which is whatever. That's cool.
It's romantic.
Yeah, I started working at this place called AIM. Which is where you've worked for the past 3 years. That's amazing.
Gosh.
It's a small world.
Go Guns.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
that's all
leave
to
it
say
at
about
that.
that. There's nothing else to say.
But I was working this job and doing an internship, and like 3 days into the internship, the youth pastor announced that he was going to resign. So the young adults director was going to take the youth pastor's place, and they asked me if I would become then the young adults director and replace the guy who was moving up.
Wow.
So in that moment, it was like days into my internship, and I already had this plan to go to South Carolina, but it seemed like, okay, this is a way better opportunity. I had already started like having conversations with. I had gone to the church for about 6 months or so I had relationships, and I feel like that's what kept me here. It was like, man, I know these people, I love these people. I haven't taken a step even into the South Carolina position, so I'm going to bail on the South Carolina church because it wasn't, I hadn't even signed anything or set anything up because it was so early in on my internship. Like it was still early June and I wasn't going to move there till late August. So I was like, well, I'm just going to bail out on it and stay there. And that's how I got the position I got. I never really even interviewed for it. It was more just like, hey, this kid's an intern. Like, and he seems, I mean, the church was in desperate need of someone else on staff to pick up some of the work. So, that was how I got my position. And there are many, to go back to the original question, like there are so many people who were in class with me, like same year, whatever, like, and have struggled along for years trying to get into a ministry position. Because at 22, you don't have any experience. Like if it weren't for me falling into this random like set of circumstances in this exact moment, somebody quitting, I never would have gotten my job. Like there were 2 other interns there at the time that one had 1 more semester year of school, so he didn't get the job. And the other, I just think, hadn't even really started. It was so early on in the internship, he didn't start till like July. So I got the position. So it's like there was I didn't do anything to orchestrate that. Yeah. Like I lucked into it in some ways. Luck may not be what I would say, but like,
you would say God.
Yeah, it was like, hey, this is what he had for me, and
your control of the situation wasn't really in your hands. Like there were a lot of outside things, and that's, you know, for you, that's God, and that's what you would say. And that's crazy. I didn't know a lot of that, dude. I didn't know your wife was the reason. That's crazy.
Yeah. Grace
is why you stayed in Ohio and didn't move to South Carolina.
Yeah.
And okay, so you said that's a whole nother story. Yeah, I've heard it a lot, but I think it could really benefit people listening if they're going through any type of, I don't know, engagement issues or dating somebody where the parents don't agree, like with it at first or whatever. Tell people a little bit about what that was like for you, where you just said, you know, you were making this decision to stay in Ohio for a girl, which is crazy. What was that like? And like trying to get to show, I don't want to say sell or convince, but to show her parents.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll give some context to the story too. It's like I was, so Grace and I started dating at the beginning of our sophomore year at Cedarville, so college. And she was a year ahead of me. She's actually younger than me, but a year ahead because she's an overachiever.
She's super smart.
Yeah, she's super smart.
Great cook.
Yep, that too. But we started dating my sophomore year, which would technically be like her junior year. And we dated for probably a year and some change. And then I knew like, okay, I gotta lock this down, because she's like, basically it was going into our like Christmas break of her senior year at that point, right? That we'd been dating about a year, and I'm like, I really think I want to marry this girl. And so I wanted to lock it down, for lack of a better term. So I went to her dad to ask, like, hey, I would like permission to marry your daughter. And if you get to know my father-in-law, like I love him. He's great. Like,
he's great.
But if you get to know him,
he's great.
You'll realize why this is true. But he didn't say no. You can't marry my daughter, but he didn't say yes either. He talked for like 90 minutes about, and told me lots of stories that I did not understand at the time. I probably still wouldn't understand if he told them to me now after knowing him for like 10 years. But like, it was definitely not a yes, you can marry my daughter. So I like went away from that. What just happened? Like, clearly I don't have permission. I need to think about this. And it was right before Christmas break that I asked him. And so this is where the story turns a little bit. It gets sort of dark and frustrating for me. Was like, she goes home for Christmas break and her dad tells her that I asked.
Oh, Gus.
What? He just told her, like, just straight up, hey, this guy asked if he could marry you. Oh. And it was, I don't think he would have told her if there were different circumstances, but she had been feeling a certain way. Like, she was doubting our relationship. She was thinking through a lot of things, and I can say this, I've said it to her, like, she knows that this is true. Like, she had not yet learned to communicate when she had like issues. She hadn't learned how to like confront someone if she thought things weren't going well. She's only ever been in one relationship, and it's with me. So like, she didn't necessarily have a ton of experience with this. So she had been doubting a ton of stuff about our relationship anyway. So she told her parents on that Christmas break, I've had all these doubts. I've, been questioning whether we should even be together, all this stuff. And so to her parents, I look like an idiot. Like, oh, Grace is having all these doubts, and this guy is like clueless.
He's missing them. He's missing all the clues.
Which I was. Like, I was clueless because Grace hadn't told me. And like, I mean, this is making it sound like I have nothing to do with it. Like, I was probably still clueless. It was probably my fault as well. Like, I never saw any of the questioning from Grace. I never asked difficult questions. I never really had a ton of difficult conversations. I just knew that I loved this girl for all the reasons, and I adored her. And I was like, I want to marry this girl. I know she's great. But we hadn't had some like tough conversations about a lot of things of the trajectory of our lives. Cause again, I don't do that. I don't think through all those things. I don't long-term plan. And so like, to her parents, I look like an idiot. So then, I mean, it was on. So like the story is, I went back to Gus, my father-in-law, multiple times, continuing to ask them, like, hey, can I marry your daughter? Can I marry your daughter? But I think the damage was already done. Like, he already had this impression of me that I was an idiot, and that wasn't going to change. I was just an idiot. And so, I don't know, it was basically that whole time. So from when I was a junior, like, in college until all the way after my senior year, it was like 18, 20 months of time. He kept saying no. No, you cannot marry my daughter. No, you cannot marry my daughter. And eventually I just wore him down. But
eventually he just gave up. He had no more stories. He had no more stories. Yeah. Oh, man. That's crazy. Yeah. So, man. Yeah. You said 5 times.
I asked right? 5 times.
5 times. Was there like for you, was there like, okay, I'm about done with this? Like, or was it, did you ever, because I know we've talked just about how that shaped you a lot into just being patient, and also just, 5th time, are you asking, okay, if he doesn't say yes, we're just going to do this. Like, this is now a courtesy to him thing versus like.
It was interesting. After the 3rd time I asked, I remember each one very specifically. The 3rd time, I drove up with my friend Darius, just like, it was, hey, it's a Friday, and I'm done with class, and Darius is done with class, and he was my roommate at the time, and I just drive up to Cleveland to ask, and I'm going to drive right back, and, like, that was it. Or we went somewhere, Darius had a concert he sang at that, like, early evening, and then we drove up. Like,
he went with you?
He went with me. I ask if I can marry him. He says no. We sleep there. and then we drive back in the morning. So like that one was probably the most demoralizing and frustrating because I knew I had like matured and grown, and like I had seen a lot of the things that they had concerns about and been like, no, they're right. I need to make some shifts. I need to grow up a little bit and have a plan for what my life looks like. And he had challenged me to have some difficult conversations with Grace, and I did, and like they were productive and fruitful, and they benefited our relationship like crazy. But it was still no. It was still no. You're not ready.
Wow.
And after that, I remember talking to my dad about it, and he encouraged me like, hey, if you don't think that you can get this girl's family on board, like, it's not worth it. Like, because family is so involved in marriage. Like, it's not just like, oh, okay, well, fine, forget you guys. We'll go off and do our own thing because we don't need family. It's like, no, Grace's family is everything to her. Like, and if it is, you cannot begin a relationship and start your marriage without their permission. So if you don't think it's worth it, like if you can't get them to say yes, you need to end this, because Grace isn't going to. You need to end it. And like it was like a gut-wrenching time for me, like thinking through, should I, like what's going to happen, all that stuff. Yeah. It was like real difficult at that time. But at the same time, I think Grace and I had a bunch of conversations after that, and it was like, nope, my dad's right, and so we will stick it out until we have their permission. And so the fourth time I asked, when he said no, I was like, okay, give me conditions. Like, tell me what it would take, what needs to change. And he gave me those.
Pretty mature. What did he say?
So then the fifth time, I had met all the conditions.
Okay.
So
what were some of the conditions?
He probably doesn't even remember these conditions necessarily.
Get your hair cut.
Stop wearing skinny jeans. It was, I had a studded belt that I would wear then, which was so dumb.
I'm so glad I didn't know you.
I wouldn't have let somebody marry my daughter if they had a studded belt on.
It's my only condition. If you are wearing a studded belt, you will not marry my daughter.
Yeah. I mean, one of the conditions, they weren't necessarily conditions that he gave me. He said to me, here's some things that I see that show like some immaturity, like, and he said a few of these to me. He said most of them to Grace. It was like, and all these things are true. Like, it's like you have never really had a job and shown that you can hold a job, which was true. I had literally the only job I'd ever had at that point was playing drums for money, like on touring teams in Cedarville, all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's not really going to be something that's profitable for that much, I don't think. No. So
kind of cool.
Yeah, I'd never really shown that I could hold a job. I had never lived anywhere on my own, so I'd only lived with my parents and then in a dorm. I had never been on my own as far as like having my own car or insurance or all these things. A lot of them had to do with like this kid has never really proven that he's going to work hard to provide for my daughter. And like Gus is super old fashioned, like, and that's one thing that's great about him. And there's a lot of people that aren't like that or whatever, like all that, whatever you think about someone who's old fashioned, and like you could use the word chauvinistic or whatever, but that was how he was. And so I sort of just respected that and was like, okay, well, let me try to prove it. And so like the night that I called him that fifth time or whatever, I was like, okay, cool. Like, I've got my own car. I've been offered a position at the church. Like, I'll be making X amount of dollars a year. Like, I have worked hard. Like, it was after that summer or whatever for all this stuff. I live on my own. I've done these things to whatever, figure it all out. And I think technically he never even said, yes, you can marry my daughter. His exact words were, well, I'm a man of my word.
Oh, that's it?
That was it.
Oh my gosh.
So once I had agreed to his conditions and met them,
that's all he said.
Yeah, the next day I proposed, and we got married a little bit later. But I would say like that waiting. So all that sounds super dramatic and like, oh man, this guy is the worst. Like, he's great. Yeah, he's great. I love. I literally call him Gus most of the time when I'm around him. It's not like a disrespectful thing. Like,
it's Dr. Komar.
Well, he is Dr. Komar. He's a dentist, so he's not a real doctor. But
dang, I don't agree with that. Gus, Dr. Komar.
He and I have a great relationship. Like, we've had so many good conversations. Like, I don't know, like it's never weird. Like he loves when we come back. Like there's nothing weird about our relationship. We've talked like literally in the last month about like all that stuff back then.
Recently, you talked about that?
Yeah, we've talked about it, and he laughs about it. And it was something interesting that he always has said. Like after he met my dad, he was like, "Man, if I would have met your dad a lot earlier, I definitely would have said yes," because it comes from this strong sense of like he believes that if you have good parents, you probably have like a good offspring or whatever, and like he can sort of learn a lot from how a person was raised as to how they will probably be. And I think he's right. Like, and my parents are great, so
yeah,
I guess
the probability is
okay. Yeah,
pretty high, right?
Yeah, and it's not always true. That's not a law. Like, there are a lot of people who have great parents who are not great people and need a lot of Jesus. But
no, it's true. That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Like, was there any point in that whole journey where you're like, not like I'm about to give up, but I'm about to lose Grace? Like she's about to give up. Like she's sick of not having her,
Yeah, somewhere it turned, because at the very beginning, so she, her parents tell her I asked at the very beginning, way back at the beginning, the first time I asked.
How did she respond to that?
She like broke up with me. Like it was crazy, bro.
You're a creep. You didn't tell me.
No, I mean this was like, and this sounds so dramatic. It probably was over dramatized because I was like 20 at the time, never gone through anything difficult. But I ask if I can marry this girl. Her dad says no. We go on Christmas break, literally days later, and I'm like bummed about that. Like what just happened? I'm still trying to process through that conversation, and like Grace stops texting me back because we went home for winter break, and I live in Indianapolis. She lives in Cleveland. She's like not texting me. She's not calling me. She's not answering anything. I'm like, what is going on? God. And I don't know. She never told me like, oh, my dad told me that whatever. So we go through this whole Christmas break, and it's like we have talked on the phone one time. It was super awkward, and we've barely texted after we've been dating like a year and like 3 or 4 months or whatever. And so we get back from Christmas break, and like the first night that we get back, she basically tells me all this, that her dad told her, like she's been having all these doubts, all these questions, like all that stuff. And like she was done. Like she was listening for sure to her parents, and that, I mean, whatever. She had gone, expressed a bunch of concerns. They said, oh man, yeah, all these things point to, and him not knowing that you felt this way points to him being clueless, and you need to be done with this. And so she basically told me she wanted to break up, and not to paint myself in, the best light in the world, but it really is. I just told her, okay, well, I think you're listening to your parents and what they have to say. And like, when you want to make a decision of your own about this relationship, like, come talk to me. I'll be waiting. And I didn't know if after that conversation, if she would come back and say, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm just listening to them. And I do want to be in this relationship with you. Or if she would be like, well, peace. And so, yeah, it only took like 3 days for her to realize,
man,
hey, I really do want to be with you. And so, like, we never really broke up. It was never like, oh, okay, we're broken up. It was more like, take some time, think through this.
Okay. That's crazy.
But she basically went to end it. It didn't necessarily end. But it could have ended very easily. And like, but that was the only time that it was really like she was going to give up. Then it turned to like, we start fixing things. Like our relationship was better than it's ever been. And there was a point where I thought she was going to turn on her family. Like, no, forget them. And then it was like trying to hold her back and be like, okay, no, we can't. Because I was just listening to my dad and what he said. Like, you can't just start this marriage off this way. Like, you've got to get her family on board if you want your marriage to start off well. And I think he was right. And we waited. And eventually got married, and it was great. And we've been married for 5 years now. So,
yeah. Do you think your marriage has benefited because of doing that? You think has that been like? Can you imagine if you didn't do that, or imagine your lifestyle if you two just didn't listen and went and did your own thing versus now? Like, what's it like having the approval of your in-laws and just like their support and everything? Like how that's worked for your marriage in different scenarios. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it did two things. Number one, it had before we were even married, Grace and I had like a common fight, something that we had like gone through together that was very trying, that had to do with like some of the craziest things you go through, is like, you know, decisions about where your life is headed. And like we had to alter all those things because of the situation, like, and your family, like, so it bonded us together in this sense of like, okay, we've gone through something like very difficult even before we even got married. And then the second thing it did, I think, was build a ton of trust with her family, that we would have had to earn some other way, if we hadn't gone through that in some senses. Like, and definitely if we would have just like eloped or something like that, like we would have gone from a place of like very, very negative trust, like zero trust, like horribly distrusted in some ways. Like it would have been awful. But then we started off by having built that trust with them. And so then there was like, I think they realized like, oh, okay, like we started off, and mom or Grace is able to, like, the first year of marriage, you know, call her mom when she's having a bad day, instead of feel like, oh, there's this broken relationship, like that if she thinks that I'm not doing well in this marriage that my mom didn't approve of, like all that insecurity stuff is gone. There was none of that. It was like, oh, from the very outset of the marriage, I have my mom there, I have my parents there in total support, and like it was so much more beneficial for our marriage, instead of the opposite that I could see. I probably couldn't have identified that or articulated that years ago, but now that I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, Grace is like first year of our marriage, like she was teaching, and it was like horrible for her, and she called her mom and her siblings like all the time because her family is huge to her, and to have had that like all messed up just because we wanted to get married a little bit sooner, like, nah, that would have been foolish. So it's been very beneficial for us, and beneficial in like tons of situations where people have come to me and been like, man, like this girl's parents don't approve of me, or like, man, my dad doesn't like this guy that I'm dating, and just being able to share our story has been crazy, even to some parents who have been like, man, we hate this guy that our daughter is dating. Being able to just sort of sit with them and be like, yeah, well, like if he's a good guy, I think he'll probably like wait, but also like don't be a jerk for no reason. Like, you know, like try to look at it from his perspective and sort of give them a perspective of someone who's gone through it as well. Because parents get so defensive of their children, like, you know, trying to get them to think rationally instead of just think from their feelings, and respond based on their feelings as well. It's difficult. So
it's cool to hear you tell that story, and like you did something that I've been trying to do recently in my life, and I think it's very beneficial to people. And it's like whenever you get hit with that situation or circumstance where you couldn't really control in the moment, right? Where like this father-in-law, well now father-in-law, then just like the father of the girl you're dating, like didn't approve of you, and you know Grace, your wife, like wanted that approval. And for you, it was almost at first, you know, I think the temptation is to like, you're wrong, you're dumb, you should be listening, you should know that I'm a good guy. Yeah. But the flip side of it is, yeah, you couldn't control that you know what he said, but you can control your response. And I think that's always big. That's always coming up, and it's just like taking a personal responsibility to see and learn from this. Oh yeah, maybe he's right. Maybe there are some, you know, those. What did you call them? The list of things that he said.
Yeah, the conditions
that he had to do. Like, take that responsibility. And that's what I've learned from your experience. So that's been really helpful for my own life, that I've thought about. Like, you always have a choice. You always have a choice how to respond to things, and to get worked up or to learn from them.
Yeah, and I think it is like, I didn't respond perfectly in any of these situations. Like I think I did learn a ton from that situation, and when I was like, man, I have no way to control this. Like, I have no power here. Like, nothing I can do seemingly changes this guy's mind. Like, nothing his daughter does, like to have these conversations, changes his mind. Like, for me to just take control and just elope sounds so dumb. Like, and isn't going to do what I want it to do. So like, what am I supposed to do? I have nothing to do. And there were times when we did well with that. There was another time where I wrote a letter to Grace's mom and dad that was like, we're gonna elope if you don't get on board, and sent it to him, which was so stupid. Whoa. Like, looking back on that, like how dumb that was. Like, so I didn't do this perfectly. And it's funny, they didn't even really respond to that letter, which is like so funny to me now. I'm like, man, like that was the perfect tactic. Like, just ignore it, act like it never was sent, what was I going to do then? Like, and I had even less control. I was like, I can't even like just blow smoke and get any response. So
Jeez. So
yeah.
did you guys ever talk about that letter? Not to get off topic or stuff. You should ask him, hey, guys,
did you saw that
yeah,
letter?
you saw that letter I wrote?
I think I said something to her mom about it one time. And she laughed about it at the time. I mean,
yeah,
this is years and years later or whatever. So it wasn't a huge deal then, but I'm sure she was not laughing about it when she received it and read it. So,
dude, thinking about your marriage and stuff, what's it like being a pastor and being almost like having your marriage on the spotlight? Is that kind of weird? I just was thinking about that. Just, okay, so you everything's, you got the family support, you got all that stuff, and it's cool to have them there. Now it's like you and Grace, and we're gonna have this marriage that also happens to be on the spotlight for everybody. Mm-hmm. Are there any, like, I don't know if you can talk about that. Is there instances where that's a little bit like hectic or crazy, or sort of does it relate to my morals and my ethics are part of my job again? My marriage is part of my job.
Yeah, it's somewhat is like that. But I think in our church it's a lot less than some other, like, and even in my position, like in a lot of churches, if you're the head pastor's wife, it's like there are a lot of expectations on you for you to be a certain way or even dress a certain way. All those things, like, which is whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. But I don't think it's that way in our church or for my position. Yeah. And I guess you could ask Grace how she feels about that. Like, she might have a different understanding of it. But a lot of it is like, it does matter, but at the same time it doesn't. Like, I'd say, for example, like this happens every once in a while where it even happened on Sunday. Somebody comes up to a different female and like that I'm just standing next to at the time and thinks that they're my wife. Like, just because we're standing next to each other. And it's like, man, it's so awesome. Like, that you guys get to do ministry together. That was literally what someone said to one of our friends the other day. Just like says it because they think that we're married just because I'm standing next to this female. Like, people look for like that type of stuff, but they're also clueless. Like, they don't understand. They don't. There have been probably 10 females throughout the last 6 years that I've been there who have been mistaken for my wife. Like, because people just don't really know. And that probably doesn't happen in tiny churches, but like, church our size, it's like I'm talking to some girl and they just think that it's my wife, so they're like, oh, that's great, or like, oh, your son is so cute, and they're clearly talking to this girl I'm standing next to, and it's my son because they know it's my son, so they assume it's my wife. That's so funny. But at the same time, there are like, I don't know, there have been a couple of times, and it more happened in student ministry than after I started being an associate pastor, more in the adult ministry side of things, where students who were like girls, like high school girls or whatever, would not understand boundaries. Like, oh, this guy is married. And like having to, just be like, okay, nope, like you can't text me at 11 p.m. and like think that I'm going to respond because you're in crisis. Like, that's inappropriate. Like, you wouldn't do that. Like, an adult woman would not text me at 11 p.m. Like, it would just never be a thought to them. But to a high school girl, it's like, oh, that's my youth pastor. Like, this is a person, and it's like they would, in some senses, like, it relates back because like they would be confused when Grace would have, harsh words with them about some of those interactions.
Grace can be scary.
Yeah,
she can be very scary.
She can. Yeah,
she'll let you know.
She's such a loyal person.
She
don't
really
cross anybody she's loyal to, especially her husband or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like that has happened, or other stuff where people just assume that she knows a lot about all the things that are going on at church, or ask her a question and assume that she's going to have like, all the information that I would have about something. And I'm like, well, no, like, she doesn't. She's not one of the pastors on staff. Right. Like, she may not know. And I think they would even be, in some ways, that like there have been cases where they look down on her because she doesn't know all that's going on or whatever. They're like, how do you not know what's going on? And it's like, well, because I don't sit in the like 4-hour meetings with the leadership team. Like, duh, of course. Like, I'm not going to just read back to her the notes of every single meeting that I'm in. So there's some of that, but there's not as much as I think it is for other people. And again, she would have
maybe she'll
She'd
have
have
something
tons
else
to
to say.
say
I want to
about it.
have her on to talk
She
about
definitely
stuff like
has
that.
a different perspective.
Yeah, that's what you
But
guys get to share too. I think you guys have shared a couple times, just like vulnerable things in both of your. Well,
yeah,
you get to speak on behalf of Grace on just things you guys have experienced and gone through and
yeah,
are
that's
going
true.
through. So that too,
Hmm.
like, shows the a little bit into the marriage, like, and how important that is.
Yeah.
Because I think of recently you guys shared
Yep.
some stuff.
Yeah. Now that you say that, that opens up a whole other can. That, I guess, is part of how I feel like, oh, I have to guard my marriage, in some senses of like, if I'm going to say something from stage, like if I'm going to share about a fight that we had, I make sure I talk to Grace about it beforehand and like even say it out loud a ton of times, because there would be a tendency for me to like talk about a fight that we had or whatever, and even just subconsciously painting her in a negative light accidentally, like not even because I want to, I'm just whatever, or painting like me in a more positive light, like, oh, I won the argument or whatever it is, like just trying to be careful about those things. It does get a little sticky when you're talking about sharing things from stage that are personal to us as a couple, but I'm an individual speaking from stage and making sure that she's okay with it. Like, I mean, that's one of the things I assume like we would talk about at some point. It's like we've been trying to have another kid for like 3+ years now.
Wow.
Really since Eli was born. He's almost 4. Like, we've been trying to have another kid, and we have gone through tons of like treatments for fertility stuff, and like have still are not pregnant as far as I know. And it's like when I shared that one Sunday morning, talked about it, and like it was after months of intense conversation of like, is this okay if we share it? Like, what are the repercussions? Like, and Grace was a trooper in that season, because it's very personal for her as the mom, as the one who, I mean, even now sharing about like, she feels like she's not like able to do what God designed her to do, and like has a lot of insecurities in regard to that. And it's one of the most difficult things we've ever walked through. Like the trying to get Gus on board pales in comparison to like the current thing that we walk through every day, trying to get through it. But like the hardest part, I think, about being a pastor's wife in that situation is like people coming up to you then because I shared it. They don't come up to me necessarily. They go up to Grace as the one who can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
And are like, man, like that's really difficult, but just try this. I did this and this worked.
Which is the last thing you want
to
hear.
Man, like horrible. And we talked all about that before I shared it. I was like, this is going to happen. Like, you will have escalated, frustrating conversations with church people for a little bit. And it's died back down or whatever after we shared. But like at first it was like everybody saying what diet she needed to be on, or like that once you just stop worrying about it, you're probably just stressed or whatever, all this kind of stuff, like, which is heartbreaking and very frustrating. But that's I think just part of it, like life in ministry, like there are a lot of people that don't get it. And I can't necessarily fault them for not getting it, but it also opens like so many doors into amazing conversations. Like, I wouldn't trade sharing about that for the negative, because the positive that it's opened up of people who I know, like this past Sunday, I talked with a girl and her husband who are like 15 weeks pregnant, who had lost a baby the morning or the night before I preached about infertility.
Oh my gosh.
And like they had like miscarried, found out, and gone to the hospital on like Saturday throughout the day and all that, and were like, we do not want to go to church. Like, I just can't like do it, but for some reason felt compelled to, and showed up. And like, I mean, I bawled with them after the service, and it was like,
jeez,
because they told me all about it, and like identifying with them, and even walking through, because it was another, I don't know, 8 months before they got pregnant again. Like, they went through some of the same fertility treatments we were going through, all this kind of stuff. It was like such an amazing experience to walk through with some other person that if I wouldn't have shared, like, I wouldn't have been able to experience the sadness like with them that morning. But I also wouldn't have been able to like share that joy, 5 days ago, like with them when hearing, like when I hear she's pregnant, or even, I mean, I knew it before because you could see like that she was pregnant. Like when I saw her, like, and I knew she was pregnant, like I'm just like losing it because I was just like, oh man, like finally the joy that I'm longing for, like they finally have that.
That's cool that you can get that joy for them. I feel like it's got to be tough.
Yeah.
Like when you hear other people get pregnant, you know.
Yeah.
I've always thought about that. I've always, well, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, I find myself as your friend and Grace's friend, like at times trying not to speak on anything baby related, anything like, you know, that instance where I talked about where I had a friend who I'm not on social media anymore, but he told me that they were having a baby, and it was like, did you notice when we were at Whole Foods? And I didn't say baby. I said, yeah, they were talking to this crazy event happened in their life.
I guess I didn't.
You didn't notice that. I was trying because I didn't want to bring it up, and it's so tough. Like like just that on on friends' side or your congregation's like side of like, how do we go about being normal with people or our friends who are struggling and not knowing what to bring up, not knowing to ask, not knowing what to do, and like it's cool to hear you say that thing that I'm scared to bring up. If someone's coming to you and you're actually able to experience that joy for them and with them, that's really cool because that can't be easy.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I can get there with that joy. Other times it is, it's anything but
I can't
happy. Like, and it depends on the day. It depends on the situation. It depends on whether that person is clueless and a jerk or like is very sensitive about it. Like there's, one of the other pastors on staff, like when they got pregnant, they had come and told us like, hey, we know what you're going through and we're going to start trying to have a kid. And like, we were even like, sensitive about that. We want to make sure we told you so that when we get pregnant, it's not this slap in the face. And then the next time they wanted to come over, we knew what was going to happen. And it was hard. And like Grace like broke down in front of them. Like when they said like, hey, we're pregnant. But like they took the time to come over and have a hard conversation, like very difficult. Like they knew that when they told us we were going to try to be happy, but also like be frustrated. And like the fact that they noticed that was fine. There's been other situations where people ignore it and don't tell you, and you can tell when a girl is pregnant eventually. And they're trying to be sensitive, and sometimes I think it does come from a genuine heart, and sometimes I think it just comes from they don't want to have a hard conversation, and that's when it gets frustrating. It's like, dude, you just don't want to sit across from me and tell me that you're pregnant because you will feel like guilt and you want to not have that guilt. So.
Yeah. And it's not like I want you to feel guilty. It's just I want you to know that we trust and love you, and just like be honest with us. It's that honesty part probably.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Sounds like, dude, just hearing you, the two experiences that you've talked about the most, like with asking your now wife to marry, her by her father-in-law 5 times, and this, like you said, the coolest thing about that process with your wife and asking her to marry you was you're able to share that with people and speak. And then hearing this too, like how that's opened up doors, you being a pastor, sharing it on stage and different things. That's like one of the coolest things I think about you is that you have your experiences and you don't look at them and like, don't use them. You use them. You use all your experiences to help others. I think that's really cool. And yeah, man, that's really something. You should write a book.
Dude, I should.
You should write a book about that. Sorry, that was a terrible segue.
But
I want to say no. It was a joke. That was a joke segue because like I really do want to speak on that, and I don't know what that you've talked about. Just I'm going to write a book or whatever. But I really do think just hearing your experiences and things, how God has used you, and like what it's like being a pastor. This taboo word now in the 21st century in America. Like you're a pastor, Christianity. Like. What, like, you know what I mean? Like, what's that? Yeah. I know you can speak on that a little bit. Like, I don't even know how far into it you've gotten about thinking. Is that?
No, I have for a long time thought about writing a book because I'm pretty famous for being able to write papers very quickly. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm probably gonna edit that out just so you know because I hate that you talk now. I won't edit that, but screw you.
Yeah, I wrote a 10.
I wrote a paper.
I wrote a 10-page paper in 7 minutes one time. So don't you can say that's ridiculous, but I got an A on the paper. And it was 7 minutes. Are we done with this? So I've always wanted to write a book in about 15 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I've thought about writing a book, but then recently, like one of our friends, like was like, dude, I really think you should write a book about some of these things that we talk about, because these conversations are just conversations we've like that surface around all the time, of like being a different kind of pastor than some people. Like when you think of a pastor, you usually don't think of me, and that's what like. I mean, I don't think it's anything that I've necessarily done. It's just, again, I don't think that way. Like putting on like some pretense of a person and like feeling like I have to act or be a certain way to be like a pastor. That's just so foreign to me. I can't do it. But the more that I've been in ministry and like had some of these experiences and all that kind of stuff, like I do think that it's important to like share about this, because I don't know what the title would be, but if it was something, if I would just name it what I was thinking, it would just be like, yeah, it's a different kind of pastor, or a new kind of pastor, because in all the pastors that you talk to that seem to be from the last generation, they think that like you have to be this like, I don't know, this perfect moral person, like moral example to be a pastor. I've been taught that in seminary, that's what it means to be a pastor, is to like hold the moral high ground and be the example, be the model for what it is to be a Jesus follower. You have to be that to be a good pastor. And I think you should be that. If you're going to aspire to be a pastor, you should seek that, but not if you fail. When you fail, you've got to be honest about it, because that's where so much hurt comes from the church. It's like, oh, this pastor tries not to show people how to follow Jesus, but tries to be Jesus, like gets that savior complex and like wants to be perfect. And then as soon as they start having like sin issues, they've got to sweep them under the rug to keep up that example. They've got to be that moral person that everyone looks up to, and they won't respect if they don't hold that moral high ground. And it always comes out. Like what you do, especially in today's world, will come out. Like it does. Like you can be the most perfect person, like all day, every day, and in a moment say something that gets recorded on a Snapchat, like that gets like tweeted out. Boom, you are done. Like if you are not able to be honest about your sin and about the person that you are, right? Like, but if you're honest about that, and if you're a different kind of pastor that's like, dude, I'm just trying to figure this out as well. Like I'm trying to like study the word and be an example of like pursuing Jesus as fast as I can, as hard as I can. And when I, stumble, getting up maybe as fast as I possibly can and not staying down, maybe getting up faster than other people and be an example in that, right? But being imperfect on purpose, like showing people like, no. If you're trying to put that on me, like, oh, I'm some like example of what it means to be Jesus, like, no way, I will not live up to that standard. I'm always going to let you down at some point. And like, you're supposed to look to Jesus, not look to your pastors as the example of what to do. You are.
Right. It's like if they come to you and say, hey, oh my gosh, if they come to you and show you how righteous you are, you want to say, no, look how unrighteous I am, just to show them. Like the comparison, I was reading this thing, it was like saints versus saved sinners. And a lot of pastors and a lot of people want to project themselves as saints versus saved sinners, and they can't relate with people, because this whole concept of being a saint is you're perfect, you have it all together. The concept of a saved sinner, it's like, yeah, you're saved, right? That whole taboo word, and you can get into the discussion about what that even means. There's many different like thinkings about it. I have my own. I'm sure we even differ on that, whatever. Probably. But when it comes down to it, what it is like, I'm not scared to show that part of me that shows I'm not perfect, because I know I'm not this person or have the relationship I have with God based off of my actions, but through Him. So it's like, I'm not scared to be like, yeah, I'm imperfect. Yeah. But people sometimes, a lot of times it's pastors, they feel the need to be perfect. Yeah. And when, like you said, when it comes out that they're not, it ruins their jobs, their careers, their families, everything. Yeah. Versus, I want to market myself as a saved sinner. Yeah. And I want to be the best exemplar of that. Like, I want to be, as a pastor, I hear you saying you want to be the best person at showing how vulnerable and honest and how your life is messed up versus how great it is. Yeah. Like, I want to go first, like, in showing that I'm willing to be vulnerable. Like, when I preached about, like, when I shared about infertility, like, it wasn't because I wanted people to feel sorry for me. It was because I wanted someone to say from stage, like, we had been in this series talking about, like, what happens when, like, the struggle is going on in your life, and, like, every sermon, like, wrapped up with a nice bow, right? Like, it was like, man, what happens when you overcome things from your past?
you know, and what happens like when you, and it's like my sermon was like, no, because there's moments in your life where you're stuck in it. Like the shit hits the fan and you're just sitting with it all over you.
Mm-hmm.
And before you've cleaned up, there's sometimes when you're in that season for years.
Yep.
For years and years and years. And the church answer is like, no, ignore that. Like, you've got to be happy. You've got to put on a smile. You've got to put on your church face and your church clothes and come to church and like be a certain way, because you can't let that sin like really affect your life. And I'm like, no. Like, I've been sitting there, like when a doctor tells my wife, like, you'll definitely get pregnant this time. And you don't. And like, what are you going to turn to God and be like, okay, then you must not exist or whatever? Like, it's either you have the churchy response of like, all right, well, but God's still good in this like trite way, or because that's apparently the only way you can respond in church, like you can't like turn your back on him. That's what you do. You're like, well, then he must not be real. That's fake. It seems so fake to just be like, well, but God's still good. Amen. Like, no, he doesn't feel good right now. Like, it seems like I'm a pastor. Like, I'm trying to obey you with my life, and like we're doing everything we can to serve you and to like sacrifice, and like we can't even have another kid. Like, the horrible parents are having children all the time. Like, babies are going unwanted all the time, and like we can't have a kid. Like, I want someone to be able to stand up on a stage and say those things, and so I did. Like, it's like,
yeah,
no, the church has to be the place where you can be honest about those things, because life is not so black and white. It's not so simple to think like, yep, no matter what happens in your life, just put on a smile and like, you know, quote a couple scripture verses and go along your way. Like, that's the type of church that everybody walks away from. Like, and the real Jesus sits in that struggle with you. And it's like, man, like, yeah, you may not understand this right now, but like, you're going through it right now. And I'm just here with you. I'm not trying to give you some like trite response and like have you like fake being happy. I'm just sitting in it with you.
Yeah.
So
man,
I don't know. Like, that was sort of a rant.
It just sounded like
and I swore. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't.
Just also speaking on that, you're the first. I'm not editing it out, but you're the first person to swear on my podcast, and you're a pastor. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But
that's why they call me the ass pastor. Associate pastor. Sorry. Oh.
Wow, that's great. It sounds just like to conclude that, like, you just, whether you write a book or whether you don't, you really are trying to model your life of being somebody who just shows who they are and not trying to hide it. You don't want to get this image from people that you're perfect. You want to model that, like, right? You don't want to, like, you're not trying to model imperfection for the sense of, like, you live this lavish lifestyle of just, like, not caring. No, you're trying really hard to live like Jesus did. Yeah. But the times you don't hide those. And that's what you kind of want to model. So I think that's really important for people to hear. I also, at the end there, you said, and this would kind of trail into, like, the ending of it, but you said something like, you don't know why you're going through this right now. And, you know, all those things. And in life, like, I've gone through a lot of stuff where I'm going through a lot of stuff, whether it be depression, just different things in my life where I don't understand why this is happening in my life, just my past experiences, all that stuff. And I never really, like, I never wanted to be going through it in the moment. Well, and it's still, I wouldn't, like, want to go through that again, right? And it's something I would never, any experience that I've went through that's been tough, it's nothing I want to wish upon people. But it's when I get done with it and I look back and I analyze and I think about how I could learn from it and grow, I wouldn't change that happened. What is like an instance in your life where you went through something or going through something and you wouldn't want it to be upon anybody else's shoulders, or you wouldn't want to, like, go through it even again, but the fact that you went through it, you would not change it for the world because it's who you are? Like, is there a time or something? Yeah.
I mean, I go back and forth on the current season of, like, there are things I've learned about it where I'm like, no, this is definitely worth it. But then there are other days when I'm like, okay, is this ever going to end? And so I don't always feel that way. But I would go back to the conversations with my father-in-law, who now I would, like, I could call and talk to him about anything, and I trust, like, that he would give me sound advice, that we would have a great conversation, that he would, like, do anything for me. I think I wouldn't trade it because it taught me to have difficult conversations. Like, I was, like, a very like laid back individual, and one thing that has very much changed about me since that time, and it wasn't just that one experience, but that was one of the main ones where it was like, no. The most important thing to do in a situation where there's like conflict is to address it and to talk through it and to have the difficult conversation and to be truthful and to be honest and to just try to get everything out in the open, because that's where like everything in the dark is not good. It's when you get in your thoughts, it's when you get in your feelings, it's when you think you play the victim, it's when everything in the dark it just not doesn't turn out well. It usually feels better in the moment, but it does not turn out the way you want it to. And putting it into the light, it always feels horrible in the moment, but it almost always turns out to where it's like, oh yeah, no, this was right. The relationship that I wanted to hide all this stuff and put it in the dark because I wanted to save the relationship. You always lose the relationship. Like whenever you push it out into the light and you say, man, because I care about this relationship, we got to talk about this thing, this tension, this agreement, this whatever it is, this thought that I had that was bad. Like I've got to put that into the light, so that it actually continues. Because in all those cases, the relationship continues, and it goes in every arena that I've understood. Like it always works. Like it is having difficult conversations with Grace when I have like lustful thoughts and stuff, and like proactively telling her, hey, I had this thought and I'm really sorry, and I could have just hid it and not told you, but I know where that leads. It leads to more hiding and more keeping things in the dark and not talking about them until something bad happens, or in a moment spilling it into the light and saying, look, I'm a saved sinner and I'm still working on this thing, and like I've got to put it out in the open so that you know that it exists, so you can call me on it, so that I don't start to dwell on it more than I should, so I feel that like frustration. And yeah, is that an easy conversation to have with your wife? Like, no, it is not. It's the worst. But it's the better one to have. And like, I wouldn't trade that situation with the old Gus for anything, because it teaches, it just has taught me so much about these conversations are difficult, but it's worth fighting through them and continually pushing through, even when the other person disagrees with you. And it's like, they're trying to avoid the conversation. I mean, that's one thing. Like if he listens to this, he might disagree, but dude, he ran from those conversations. He did not want to have them. Like, I mean, I wouldn't either, but like pursuing those and hunting those people down, even when they don't want to have that, not in a, an arrogant or antagonistic way, but like making sure that you don't just be like, it doesn't seem like they want to talk about it, let's just not address it. It's like, no, have the hard conversation.
Wow. That's good. Have hard conversations and you're not regretting that situation. That's really good, man. Thank you for sharing that. I know there's some stuff that was probably difficult to share, and just like your experience in that, and I really appreciate you coming on. I have learned and grown so much from just having you as a friend, a pastor, mentor, whatever the cliche little word is. But like, dude, it's been a privilege to call you like my friend and to walk through you. That's really crazy. But to walk with you through like your experiences has been like amazing. And, I just am very grateful to have you as a friend and to have you on this podcast. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, guys, that was Chris. As you heard, he's got some crazy stories that he's walked through and been through, and he's like seemed to learn from them all. And I think that's kind of a challenge to all of us and to me as I sit here across this table and listen to him, to not really regret those tough things that we've gone through in our moment, but in the moment when we can look back and see if we can take any responsibility for our own lives and maybe learn from them, and going forward, maybe pursuing that thing that was difficult at the time and making that kind of a mantra. For Chris, it was have difficult conversations and be honest and don't really hide things. And it sounds like it's really working out for him in his life. And I think that we should kind of try to model that ourselves. So thanks for listening, guys, and take care.